Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Robots of Red Tape. As always, I'm your host, Nick Shutt. Have here, happy to have Mr. John Conrad back, and along with Elena Agaragamova. This is my apologies for the mispronunciation on your last name, guys. How are you today?
Good.
Oh,
Good.
fantastic. And so, for everybody that doesn't know you, John and Elena, if you would please introduce yourselves, a little bit about your background, and kind of explain, a little bit about why you're here.
Yeah, Elena, you want to go first?
Sure. I come from background of talent development, have basically spent the last 14 plus years in this learning development space under the umbrella of like people, if you want to call like people operations space. So I've done everything from recruitment to talent pipelines to building out internship programs to internal trainings, external trainings, working as a consultant in this field, building businesses in this field, most of them unsuccessful, but hopefully the next one is going to be successful. So lots of experience. Just kind of really living in this talent development world, and it's an exciting space to be in, and really exciting with AI stuff coming up. So
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm John, and I've been in the tech industry for my whole career. I was one of the first people to work on Google's Chrome browser, which has been in the news a lot recently. Um, I've hired engineering teams, I've led AI teams. Most recently, I was at Amazon as a principal AI researcher, where I developed content for our VPs and directors so they could understand how AI was going to impact them and organizations. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I appreciate you both taking the time and obviously talent pipelines, retention, and talent pipelines, and attracting talent, retaining talent, and upskilling talent is huge, especially as you look at this, rapidly changing and ever evolving space, of AI and how it's going to affect both how we produce work and how we go out and find folks. So, as we think about the AI workforce right now, how do you kind of define AI workforce development today, and where are we, and how are companies approaching this this new technology?
Yeah, so AI is an interesting problem for companies because most of the productivity enhancements that companies have taken on in the past, they kind of understood, right? It's like, oh, if we switch from passing paper around to having a network where we move documents around electronically, that must be faster. I mean, there were always people that like push back, didn't like those kinds of changes, but a lot of those productivity enhancements people could kind of get their minds around. I mean, even spreadsheets, people understood, adding numbers and you have to
Mhm.
take numbers and stuff. But suddenly we have this advancement which can multiply the intelligence of your people, right? That can be a partner with them and dramatically improve their work or speed up how quickly they can produce the same quality of work. And that's really exciting. Of course, um, I think there's probably three ways that companies are reacting. The first one is the Luddites. So they're the ones that are like, oh, this is another fad.
Mhm.
This is just a Segway personal transporter all over again, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to go anywhere. The second group, they're all in. They're like super enthusiastic. They bought early. They're like, go, go, go. And so those people are they're paying a huge price because the prices are really high right now and it's hard to get hardware, those kinds of things. Um, but they also are perhaps too quick to make um, uh, human resource changes. So
Mhm.
we see companies like letting go all their customer support people or cutting back dramatically in their workforce. And so basically the calculus they're doing is if these technologies allow us to have 30% more productivity, I could just get rid of 30% of my people and deliver the same products and quality for my customers at a greater profit. And for them, they get this kind of stock market boost because it looks like they're more profitable. But then there's third companies which I think are really interesting, and this is what I encourage people to think about: is if you can improve what your company is delivering to your customers, like you can get 30% more productivity out of your people, which means that, of the list of things you wanted to get done, you can do 30% more
Mhm.
at the same cost. It's like that's a really good thing for your customers. You don't get that stock market bump, but what you do get is customers noticing, oh, they're fixing bugs faster, they're delivering features faster, there's new products coming out that they've never had before. And I think those groups, which might be a little they're not all in necessarily, they're like starting to get into AI, they were a little more careful. But those groups, I think, over time accelerate and pass the people that are slashing their workforce and getting rid of employees that have worked within the company and know the company and are a known resource. So anyway, that's what I think. There's basically those three types of companies.
Mhm.
And if I may jump in here, from a talent development perspective, the way I think of like AI talent workforce is like basically how I think about, regardless of the technology and et cetera, like just what are we doing with preparing our workforce? So whether it's upskilling, reskilling, like some of the things John mentioned, are we creating this literacy around this topic in AI in this case across the organization? Are we educating people? Are we decreasing the anxiety around these topics? I think that's the thing we're not doing right now is we're not talking enough about it inside organizations. So it's creating a lot of that uncertainty. So it creates that anxiety, and then it creates that resistance from staff to be able to actually hop on board and want to be excited about it. And then the other thing is like really looking at the talent pipelines of the staff coming in. So are we working with universities or technical schools to actually, increase that pipeline? I mean, that's a whole other challenge in its own because not a lot of universities or tech schools are, preparing the students accordingly. So there's still going to be a gap, but at least you're starting with something, some sort of a base versus just kind of trying to do everything on your own as an organization. You can actually work with partners outside of your organization to increase that quality of that pipeline.
Absolutely. And I would also assume that, looking at the different talent pipelines, like there's different levels of AI talent, right? And there's folks that are doing different functions. And I think that, when you start looking at the top like AI research companies out there, like you can talk to OpenAI and Anthropic. I think that they're hiring a different kind of person than folks like that are implementing some of these technologies are doing. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically coming into this. I thought, okay, well, we should really talk about that because companies have some misconceptions about who are they going to have, what are they going to need, how are they going to get benefit out of it.
Hmm.
So I made a nice graphic for you. So I
Okay.
have this pyramid here behind me. Basically, what I have at the very top, I have those AI researchers that so many people are thinking about, right? So these are people with PhDs, they have deep experience with building large scale systems. Those are the people that Google, Meta, Anthropic, IBM, like all those big companies are trying to hire. And
Hmm.
those top people are commanding enormous salaries, right? If you're not offering them 1 million or more a year, they're not even going to talk to you. And they expect, I mean, at this level, it's like $150 million a year for hardware. Like you're going to need this massive investment. And guess what? You're competing for that hardware with all of those other companies. So there's a very small group that's going to do that. But that's okay because that's not what most companies are going to do. So at the bottom of this pyramid where we have the most people, we have what I call data engineers. These are the people in your company that they know SQL, they know how to move data around, they probably know a little Python, it's because that's how they are kind of automating stuff. Well, these people are fully capable of helping your company move into machine learning. And so it used to be machine learning required these AI people at the top, right? The PhDs, but it doesn't anymore. There's incredible solutions that are like 6 lines of Python that your data engineers can automate important decisions in your company. They can, you know, create systems to detect fraud or improve productivity or there's a lot of things they can do. There's so much low-hanging fruit in your company, machine learning which is a machine learning solvable problem. And you already have these people. These are great people. And so, the problem with hiring is that your hiring process is never perfect. And so you have this unknown quantity coming into the company, whereas these data engineers that know your stuff, they've been there for years, you know their productivity, you know what they're like, they're a known quantity. So this is where, as a CTO, when I talk to companies, I emphasize this. It's like you have these incredible resources available and you have all this low-hanging fruit. Go get that, right? Enable that because it's actually it's pretty easy. And then above that, you've got your software engineers. Not all companies have these, but if you have software engineers, there's kind of two different levels. One is those that um, they've built kind of in the cloud services. They have experience with those kinds of things, which is most software engineers anymore. They can take third-party AI, meaning like you go and use OpenAI's APIs, you go and use Google's APIs, right? And so you don't have to create a whole model. You're just going to use it, and then they can use the data that the data engineers have prepared to create advanced solutions like retrieval augmented generation, even agents. All those things are available to your software engineers because there's now it's different than 2 years ago. There's wonderful tutorials that just walk you through. There's great sample code that they can just use off the shelf. It's like your software engineers can do so much more than what you imagine if you just give them the space to go after it. Now, at the very top of the software engineers, that's where you have the opportunity for them to grow into being AI researchers. Because again, there's a lot more information out there. It's a lot easier. The packages are available and there's good instruction. And this is where you might build domain specific, what are called foundation models.
Hmm.
So you're not going to go and create GPT-7, right? That's too expensive. It's hundreds of millions of dollars and you need 400 or 500 people working on it. But what you can do is you can create an AI that deeply knows your business.
Hmm.
So if you think about language, what these neural networks are doing is they're finding the relationship between the different words, like how do nouns relate to verbs, to adverbs, to adjectives, how all these things work together. Your business has those kinds of things. It's like how does a shipping container relate to weather, relate to a port, relate to, right? And so they can go and build a foundation model that understands those relationships and do cool stuff. But that's starting to get towards the top of those software engineers.
Hmm.
And again, that low hanging fruit at the beginning, there's an enormous amount of money and savings that you can make taking advantage of those people you already have.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, John. Elena, anything to add on that?
No, I'm
No?
good.
Absolutely.
That's all John's game right there.
Hmm. Yeah. And so as we look at this, kind of where do you both see the biggest talent gaps within this space, and where do you think we need to build?
I think just from what I see in the market, so I do recruitment for kind of software engineers and data engineers, like so that's kind of the recruitment place that I'm in. So I do see a lot of that talent coming through. And what I often notice, and my gut feeling, what's going to happen with AI talent is that there's not much of it exists. Like there's not a lot of people that depending on what the company looks for. So I think let's start from the beginning. I think as a company, depending on where you are with your AI capabilities, AI, just what you're already doing. So if you're a company who's starting off and you just don't know anything, like you're just kind of now diving into it, I think what John described is starting with that low-hanging fruit, like data engineers. That's beautiful. I think the more higher you go, the bigger problems you have because you will have a shortage of these AI specialists that are true, like those PhDs and etc. So I think the challenge is going to be is finding that balance between academia and experience because you're not going to have a lot of those AI people. You're not going to be able to afford a lot of those AI people that are top. So that's going to be a challenge. So I think finding a balance of what your company needs based on the maturity that your company is at when it comes to AI and those kind of things. So I think that's probably going to be interesting. I think one again, kind of like quick, not a, I don't want to say quick fix, but like that low hanging fruit is again is like looking for problem solvers. I think that we always like, at least in like when you, I mean, you know this, Nick, when you're working with hiring managers, it's a lot about like we need somebody who fits this criteria and they need to be perfect for it. But the reality is it's very difficult to find that talent and it's very competitive for a lot of that top talent. So
Hmm.
where can you be a little bit flexible and where can you just look for those skills that as long as the person can get the training, they'll be all right, like problem solving,
Hmm.
right? People that know how to experiment, people that are curious. I think that's going to be key is looking for those softer skills, if you want to call them that, because as long as they have that base and come from that maybe engineering, computer kind of IT background, I think you can train the rest of it. As John mentioned, there's a lot of like things that you can, you just need to be a problem solver, and like in my opinion, like that's the key kind of skill that I will be looking for if I cannot afford or find that top AI talent that's in the market.
Yeah, I love, go ahead,
I
John.
agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And one of the things that I would do when I was hiring marketing people, when I was at eBay and Amazon, is I would outline for them a database schema. And
Hmm.
they had no idea what that was, right? But I'd say, okay, there's kind of a table looks like this and a table looks like that. And I'd walk them through an example of using the schema. And then I would just ask them, okay, let's just talk through this. How would you given what I've just taught you, how would you use that to solve this problem? Right? And so what I was looking for is, okay, how quickly do they learn? How can they understand these concepts? Because that's going to be important. And that turned out to work really well. We ended up differentiating between groups of people, and we found some really talented people that did great stuff. But there's this interesting gap that especially kind of medium-sized and founder-owned companies is going to run into. You run the risk of, a VP or whatever showing up at the company and saying, "Hey, I met this guy on this airplane, and they know everything about AI, and we're going to go do this thing," right? And so the education that I was providing to Amazon leaders was, hey, how do you recognize that something is a machine learning solvable problem, right? How do you track the progress of a machine learning or AI project? Because that's a mystery for a lot of people. How do you know it's gone off the rails,
Hmm.
right? How do you audit its performance, right? And what are things that you really can't or shouldn't do with AI, right? Because there's all kinds of legal regulatory things that you can get in trouble with AI. And if you've got someone coming in that says, "Hey, they're a guru, they're going to do everything," you're probably in a lot of trouble. And so your leaders need to be upskilled, right?
Hmm.
It's really valuable for you to like pick a trusted leader. You're like, this person, I trust them. They're good with technology. They're smart, and just have them go and figure out like, how do I recognize a machine learning solvable problem, and how do I audit this stuff? Like if they have those two skills, you're going to be way ahead because those projects are going to come. And the last thing you want is someone saying, "Hey, there's this guy I met on an airplane, and we're turning over $1 million to them to go solve all of our problems," right? That's just not going to work out for people.
Absolutely. I think is as with everything, right? When something gets really, really hot, and like AI is really hot right now. Everybody's talking about it. A lot of people are looking at it. There's going to be people that are going to be jumping into the space that are going to say that they can do everything, and yet they can't and they won't. And I think providing that training to leadership to understand the difference is going to be key because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to invest in the wrong people or the wrong solutions or the wrong technology to ensure, so how what training should organizations be providing to their leadership? And when you start looking at reskilling an organization and upskilling the organization, where do you think you should start? Should you start at the top with the people making decisions at the bottom? And how does that training differentiate?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I want to back up just for a
Go ahead.
second. So, um, your company has really smart leaders. They know their business, right? They're probably really well educated. They've been doing this stuff for a long time, like they have deep experience. The the fascinating thing to talk to leaders at Amazon was, look, a lot of your intuition is going to get flipped, right? Things that you think are impossible are easy. Things that sound easy are impossible, right? And that's going to be hard for you because you've got all these years of experience and intuition, and you know the rules, and these things are kind of breaking the rules. So let me give you an example. Amazon has hundreds of millions of lines of Java code, right? And um, so they were stuck on an older version because the transition to the newer version was just going to be too rough, and they were going to have this enormous project, and they kept trying to get out of this tech debt that they had, but it was going to be tens of millions and not hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was going to stop all other work. AI comes along, and they realize, oh, well, we can automate this. Like we can have the AI do most of the work, and then the engineers just go through and make sure that it did it correctly, and we're good. It's like the day is so the conversation I had with them is the day is coming when an engineer is going to walk into your office and they're going to say, "Hey, this hundreds of millions of lines of legacy code, we can convert it into Rust, which is dramatically faster and more secure." And you're going to think, well, look, we're not, what is it, like $20 million in like a 7-year project? We're not going to do that. And they're going to say, no, it's like a week of work.
Hmm.
It's like, and the rust that we get out at the end will we have unit tests and it'll have integration tests and it'll be idiomatic rust. Like it'll have comments. It'll be better than the code that we have in like every way. And we think we can do that code change in a week. That's amazing, right? That's crazy.
It's incredible.
But like that, that's actually a product that IBM has. It's like IBM will come into your company and say, "Hey, you've got COBOL. We can move COBOL to a different language. What language do you want?" The AI does most of the work, and it does it in record time. And that the amount of time it's going to take is going to get smaller and smaller. And so the intuition that, oh, this is too big of a project, there's no way we could do this, is flipped,
Hmm.
right? Stuff that wasn't possible becomes possible, and stuff that sounds really easy might still be impossible, right? That's where you could run into a big risk. I'm sorry. So
What
your
are some of the
question,
things? What are some of the things that sound really easy that are impossible or incredibly difficult? Can you give an example of that as well?
yeah. So there's the the biggest tip off is that we don't have the data, right? And so there might be this business outcome that you really would like, but there's no data.
Hmm.
Like the example I used to use at Amazon was how many redheads are walking down the street right now. It's like we don't know. We don't have cameras. We don't have any data. Like we don't have any training data from like years of experience. Like we don't know that. That's not our core business. We have no data, right? And so leaders can get bamboozled into, oh, we're going to have this magical thing, but a human being today can't solve the problem or hope to solve the problem because they don't have the data, right? And so those are the kinds of things that like AI is magical. It can do everything. We don't need an AI. We don't need a lawyer. We can use an AI lawyer. Like those kinds of things are potentially really dangerous uh,
Hmm.
because there's so much hype around AI that you might end up. People want to be outside the box, but sometimes outside the box is just falling off a cliff. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But your question about, well, who do we educate and how, which was I think your original question that I interrupted. Um, is it's a really valid one. Like I think you can't focus only on the leadership at the top, right? Because then everybody at the bottom is scared because they're doing all these AI things and we're all going to get replaced. You can't do it only at the bottom because then the VPs are investing in projects that are unrealistic or are costing way too much. And so you do kind of need to upskill the whole company, but the topics and content are dramatically different, right?
Hmm.
Like one of the first things I would do is, um, assuming a company hasn't already done this, is I would sit everybody down and I'd say, hey, you can't take internal documents
Hmm.
and upload them to OpenAI and have them work on them.
Hmm.
Because this is what you're actually doing, and explain it. Show explain the terms and conditions, and say we know you want these tools. We're going to get you these tools,
Hmm.
but you can't. If you're doing that, it's the same thing as just emailing the document to Microsoft and OpenAI. Don't do that.
Hmm.
Um, And so you're going it takes some sophistication. You're going to need to like have different levels of training. And you can find, say, the software engineers in these group, you can find, two or three software engineers that are going to be the core group, and their big first project is a proof of concept that's going to demonstrate how we could use this stuff, right?
Hmm.
Good. They'll have to self-train the people, the largest group of people at the bottom of the organization, right? Because you always have a lot of like first tier people that are talking to end users. My goal with them, like we developed a curriculum for Amazon's fulfillment center employees and data center employees, right? And the main goal there was to reduce the fear.
Hmm.
It's like we want them to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I think this is a machine learning solvable problem," and propose good things because they work with this stuff all day long. But if they're scared of AI, right? They're dubious of it. They're not going to do that. They're going to try to find ways to slow it down, impede it, not have it in their workplace, those kinds of things. Um, so I think that you need someone kind of to look holistically at the organization and talk through the different training you're going to have at different levels.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to kind of piggyback on what John was saying. I think the whole transparency and communication is super important because we spend a lot of time talking about the technology piece, but in order for that to work, you need to have people on board. So I think we need to really address this fear of uncertainty in people. I think that is a big thing because, we know this, people are not productive. If you're afraid, you're not going to come up with ideas. If it's going to be punished or if you think you're going to be replaced by this idea. So I think communication, transparency, and depending again where the maturity of your company is when it comes to AI, starting with that communication, the transparency, making sure people are not uploading documents they shouldn't be uploading to OpenAI and so on. And then looking at how you can implement and give people a heads up, like, hey, like at each level, we're going to be doing a number of activities. So we're going to be at senior level, here's what we're going to be talking about. Your managers are going to be doing this, and here's what we're going to be doing across board. And then creating these kind of on continuous ongoing trainings, activities around the topic. Because I think another thing where a lot of leaders get stuck is like, oh, we don't know where to even start. And it's this big problem, but it doesn't have to be. It's like, how can you take this big topic, break it down into small deliverable pieces where you can continuously implement those trainings over a period of 6 months, 12 months, whatever that looks like, in mini places of 30 minutes a week, an hour every month, whatever works for your company, right? And then how can you then enroll people into specific trainings individually when it comes to upskilling, reskilling? Can you hire a fractional AI person to come in and do consult? Like if you don't have those people on board, that's what a lot of companies are doing. Like how can I hire a little like a consultant or a fractional person to come in, and advise us on these things if we don't know. So I think at the leadership level, we also get paralyzed because we don't know how to start. And then that just put, it's like analysis by paralysis, right? Is that the expression? So,
Mhm.
or paralysis by analysis, right? Is that one? So,
Yep.
so I think we just need to get our own way in that way and just have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I saw this video recently of um, they were introducing barcode scanners to grocery stores, right? So like the new technology, and this is what it's going to be like, and you could hear the that boop, that
Mhm.
didn't exist before that all of a sudden, and I was thinking about those cashiers. It's like um, if you have a cashier that's telling people as they come through, you better check your receipt because I don't think this thing is right, right? And like going really slow because they don't trust the machine and they don't understand it. That's a big problem, right? Your customers are going to be like, I don't want to go to that machine, and I don't want to, the productivity boost you were going to get because it was going to be faster doesn't exist. As opposed to a cashier who's like, hey, this thing is really cool because it reads the barcode. It has to read the same number 100 times in a row, which is, by the way, how it works before it beeps. Isn't that crazy? It's so amazing. And then if you could get your cashiers to focus on the fact that, look, you can just move this thing across the scanner, but talk to the people.
Mhm.
Like, how are you doing today? Did you find everything you need? Like your role changed from typing these numbers to having a relationship with customers and solving problems and recognizing people because you're not, busy typing in the corner. It's like that changes companies. And it's the attitude of the cashiers that, turned out to be really important. The
Mhm.
machine didn't change, right? But their job changed in a really good way. Everybody got the productivity enhancement.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I mean,
know,
would you go to a grocery store that was advertising the fact that they don't have barcode scanners and everything is hand typed in?
no, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
No.
Yeah, and it's interesting, when the like on that, another example, when the in-home freezer was becoming popularized, right? Before that, everybody used ice boxes. So there were huge companies that they just delivered ice to people and they would, so you could have and put another piece of ice in your ice box to make sure all your stuff stayed cold. When the in-home freezer became a thing, all of the companies that went out and harvested and delivered ice were really, really, really worried about it, and they actually took out a lot of advertising at the time. It was local newspapers telling people that organic, natural grown, well, it wasn't organic, but natural grown ice is healthier for you, and started playing up the health benefits versus ice that you make in your freezer. And like now, what, almost 100, almost 100 years later, we couldn't even conceive of not having ice that just is made in your freezer. And it's really, really interesting to see. But like those companies went away, either innovated or they went away and went out of business, unfortunately. And that's also, I think, part of this is that, this is when you start looking at studies that quote productivity differences between people that utilize generative AI as a function of doing their job to enhance their productivity versus those that don't. Um, I mean, that's like a 40 to 50% jump. And this is, based on older data from like over a year ago or about a year ago. Um, like, if I can essentially do the job of 1.5 people with the same person, that's going to give me a huge competitive edge from in a lot of different ways, to over companies that aren't embracing this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people talk about creative disruption, right? That's right at the heart of the whole tech industry. And the idea is that um, there's going to be something that comes along that disrupts the old way we did things. And there's going to be uh, a massive change, right? And so the companies that create that change or lead that change or invest early in that change, they get that acceleration at the beginning. And the companies that hold back and are scared and don't change end up being disrupted. In other words, like they fall apart, they disappear.
Mhm.
Um, so this is the scary part of that cycle because we're at the beginning of the cycle where a lot of companies, a lot of business models that used to work don't necessarily work very well anymore, or companies are failing to invest in the best AI projects and are wasting money in, bad AI projects. And so, they're in real trouble. And so all of a sudden, we are seeing a lot of layoffs and we are seeing a lot of reorganizations. And what will happen is eventually we'll see consolidation in the market. The winners will start to buy the losers to get their data, right? Turns out in the AI economy, data is the most valuable thing you can buy from another company in many ways. But then we're going to start to see an explosion of new ideas and new companies, things that we hadn't thought about before that are going to suddenly exist. Um, and it turns out in each of these cases, like you look at electricity and you look at, all barcode scanners, like all of these kinds of things. Initially, there is this disruption, which is really scary and people don't like it. But then the productivity boost drives the entire economy, and there's more jobs and new jobs and better jobs. Sawing ice on a frozen lake in Minnesota, not a great job,
Mhm.
right? There are better jobs. Being a refrigeration engineer or someone that installs refrigeration in grocery stores is a much better job than being out there with a saw. So yeah, it is scary, but we're going to get there. And and what we see is when the economy grows and productivity grows, people end up better off in the end.
Mhm. Yeah, and so as as I mean, we've talked a lot about differing types of AI talent, and Elena, you spoke to this a little bit, but how do you define, both of you from your different perspectives, define good versus bad AI talent, right? What are the most important skills? And this is both from a hard skill side and from a soft skill side.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that, and I'll kind of pass it over to John for the specifics on the tech skills. But if we're looking at AI talent, I think I would look at it as again any other talent. So you have the hard skills, which is the AI skills, and I'll leave that to John. But then
Mhm.
you have the soft skills, and I think this is where it becomes difficult because we know that typically, maybe I'm generalizing, but a lot of software developers, a lot of people who come from tech backgrounds, they tend to be very technical and they're missing soft skills. So I think the challenge again, not the challenge, but the opportunity for people who are able to be super technical and also who are able to then translate those technical skills and communicate those, projects they're working on in a non-technical way to non-technical crowds and their teams that might not be technical folks, right? I think that's a skill in its own, like the communication of explaining what this technology is going to do, explaining it to the end user and so on. So I think we see a lot of challenges that in software developers. I think if you're a person who has the technical skills and the ability to communicate what you're doing, why, and then motivate and inspire others to follow the lead and so on, I think that's one piece. Another piece is being curious enough. And this is what usually a lot of the technical people tend to be pretty curious about innovations that are coming up, right? Not everybody, but that's also, I think, a skill that can be kind of practiced and taught is like, are you curious about what's happening? Do you have the courage to experiment? And this is where also the company comes in. I love this title I recently saw, and this is from Flight Studio. So they are a podcast, what are they called? Like a podcast studio that basically hosts different podcasts and so on. But they have a person on their team, and her title is the head of failure / experimentation. And
Mm.
I love that. So like literally that's her title. And they're very successful. They're backed by Stephen Bartlett, who's a famous podcaster and so on. So it's his company. So and I love that. I love that a company needs to back up and create space for failure and experimentation because I think this talent that comes in has to be courageous enough to want to try things and experiment with things. And if the company doesn't provide that space, it becomes very difficult to even, encourage that talent to do that. So, and then the final piece on the soft skill side, again, just going back to the basics. I cannot stress this enough. I think it's great that we want to have all this great AI talent, but the bigger challenge we're going to have is, are people able to manage change? Are people able to manage their energy levels? Because there's so much you can do in a day, and all the AI is going to complement a lot of the things that you're going to be doing. The biggest challenge we have today, especially in management roles, is ability to just manage our day to day without losing our minds. Like, I mean, simply put, I think we need to not forget that there's a human behind, doing these roles. There's a human being, and we have to spend a little bit more time focusing on making sure that human being is operating at their top abilities from physical, mindset, environment points of view, right? How do we encourage that in organizations so that they are able to be curious, they are able to be creative and innovative, because that becomes exhausting after a while. And I always mention this because I think we're forgetting that part, that human piece of what makes us a high performer, which is what makes us productive as human beings. We cannot forget the biology behind what drives us and so on. So I'll pause here. I'll pass it over to John for the AI skills.
Yeah, I think Elena's really wise about this stuff. And um, so, as I got to know her and saw this perspective that she had, I thought, okay, she would be a great person to found a company with because she understands that, you could think about your employees as being engines, right? And engines run really well at a certain RPM, and you kind of want them to run at that RPM, and they need to be, but sometimes they have to burst, right? You have to go speed up the engine and run it much faster than its optimal position because that's just what happened, right? Something crazy happened. There's a deadline. We got it. Companies that run people at 100% RPM all the time
Mhm.
are going to lose people, right? And it's not for good for anybody, including the company. Companies that don't know where that right place is for their employees might be just wasting money because the employees are bored and they're not interested in. And in both of those extremes, people aren't creative. But uh, the um, the thing we wanted to talk about with oh, and I just lost the thread. I'm so sorry. Um, and what was your question again, Nick?
About what, when you're looking at AI practitioners, what is the most, what
Oh,
skills
yeah,
are
yeah,
most
yeah.
important?
Okay, so my PhD work is actually in psychology. And so that doesn't sound like it applies very much, but it turns out the psychologists have this problem. They have to study the human brain, which is far too complicated to understand, right?
Mhm.
And it turns out that if I'm hiring AI researchers, or I'm looking at who's my really good AI researcher that I'm going to, maybe it's a data engineer, maybe it's a software engineer, but they're on the AI project. Who do I who do I look for? What do I want in that person? And for me, it's the person who's willing to, or who's creative in creating an experiment to
Mhm.
do the measurement. So, like, I see all these AI benchmark scores come out. Like, this AI has got this number here and this number there. And there's such a tiny keyhole look at the performance of that model, right? So what you really need are people that are able to say, okay, we're going to run this experiment. This is how it's going to work because in our data, in our environment, with our customers, we need to understand how it works. The good news is it's pretty easy to set up your code. So some of it's calling OpenAI, some of it's calling Google, some of it's calling Meta, some of it's calling Anthropic. And so you can run these experiments. I don't trust AI researchers who have the hubris to believe they understand these systems. They're just too large and too complicated, right? There's a half a billion, maybe there's a trillion parameters in these models, right? And so no one actually can understand those or predict exactly what they're going to do. And so the only way to do it is to fall back like psychologists and say, okay, we're going to run an experiment. We're going to see how it works under these conditions.
Mhm. Yeah, I love what both of you are saying around this because I think that, yeah, as I look to hire people, and I hire people all the time, and obviously depending on the specific role and what they're doing, like you look at, I always look at curiosity and people's interest. And to your point, Elena, I get them to explain what they do on at a technical level to me. And if I can understand it, I know that, whoever I'm going to put them on a project talking to and working with is going to be able to understand it as well. And like, so I think that that's absolutely huge. And then in addition to that, I love that, you like look at the hubris piece because, John, ego's a huge red flag for me as I'm looking to hire people. It absolutely is because, if you're going to have an ego with me in an interview when I'm having a conversation with you up front, how are you going to speak with your coworkers? How are you going to speak with the people that, are on project with you? How are you going to speak with the clients and the customers who you're delivering things to? And what is that going to tell them about our company and how we represent ourselves, right? And so, I always look for like, incredibly curious, humble people is kind of that's what I love. Like those are the people that I want to work with, right? And I've had some very, very, very gifted, very intelligent folks on the team over the years, and absolutely like the humble, curious, driven people that just love to solve problems and love to figure out how is this actually going to work? How are we actually going to deliver it and approach it with no ego is, I mean, that's the spot. Like that's the sweet spot, right? That's the dream as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, at Google, we used to say, and they probably still do, you know, show me, don't tell me.
Hmm.
It's like you have this idea, you think it's going to work, like write enough of the code or do enough of an experiment to like give us a signal as to, okay, you're probably right. We'd rather see that than, have a bunch of slides about how amazing the thing is going to be just because.
Yeah.
Um, but managers have to be um, managers have to be open to that type of work style, right? It's like, the first thing we're going to do is go look at the research papers and see what they're saying, which doesn't look like a lot of work. There's not a lot of typing going on, right? There's a lot of reading and thinking and talking and discussing and maybe some whiteboarding um, and that's okay, right? Um, so managers, uh, if you're going to retain science talent, you're going to have to provide an environment where people can do science.
Mhm. Absolutely. And how much weight do you, as you look at folks, how much weight do you put on education versus experience? Both of you.
Uh, again, I think it has to be a balance. I think it depends on the role that they're in. So obviously, the short answer depends. Um, I typically see, at least again, I have not hired specific for like AI specific talent, but like if we're just talking about like, those data engineers, software engineers, I think having the experience probably has the upper hand. Um, in at least in what I've seen, because you can be, it's like one of those things like you can have the best resume in the world, but if nobody knows about you, it doesn't really matter, right? Like it's irrelevant. So, and I feel like the same way you can have all the right certifications, all the right, top education, but then if you don't actually know how to do the job, it becomes like it's completely irrelevant at that point, right? So I think experience and actual hands-on matters. I would weigh it a little bit higher on the poll, simply because a lot of the things that are taught at universities, which is another challenge, is like theory based. So again, depends on many factors, but even with software development stuff, I can imagine like it's just and every company is so specific. So like every company does their own way, the way they do their implementations and development and stuff like that. Everybody has their own methodology. So like the methodology you learned at school is probably not going to be applicable as much. So I think experience kind of wins for me, John.
Yeah. So I've hired chemical engineers and mechanical engineers and electrical engineers, lots of economists, to do AI research. And it, if you look at modern science education at the college level, a lot of it is simulation and code. Uh, at the best schools, that's certainly true, right? Everything is becoming software. Um, and so they have a lot of the experience, the basic experience that I can start them with. And then the question is, do we have a mentor, or can I sit down with them and kind of walk them through a solution and help them get there? It used to be I had to do that personally, but now there's so many good resources online. So if I can find, um, I always try to find a mind that impresses me. It's like, okay, this person is really smart. And it's okay if they're really smart in chemical engineering and they're not really smart over here because if they're that smart and they know their own stuff and I can get them excited about AI and machine learning, which obviously isn't all that hard, um, we can all benefit from that. And the interesting thing that happens is like I hired someone who's a climate scientist and they deal with this crazy amount of huge amount of data and it's low quality data and all that kind of stuff that didn't seem to really apply to retail, but boy, did it apply to retail. And they're like, oh, in climate science, we do this and this and this to solve these kinds of problems. That's great. The diversity of experience across sciences ends up being really valuable. But again, you know, those are people that I would say were more kind of the software engineers. We were doing foundation models, so we were kind of at the top of that. But you have all these data engineers, and guess what? SQL's not that hard. And Python is not that hard. And so like you can take a lot of people you wouldn't expect, and you can get them up to speed and do really valuable stuff at this level.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and dovetailing on something you said, Elena, I think that one of my favorite sayings in the recruiting space is certified does not mean qualified, right? Just because you can pass a test doesn't mean you can implement anything, right? And so, I had like, one of the things that always frustrates me is when, and like I'm literally going through this right now with a client is where, I'm hiring somebody for them and have somebody with the wrong like they have a bachelor's degree in finance and 25 years of experience doing like cloud architecture work and that doesn't work because they need a degree from an accredited school in one of these very specific areas and it's very specific accreditations and credentials and it's like as
Yeah.
all you're doing is shooting yourselves in the foot. And like I understand this is not their, this is they're trying to deliver for a client who's the one flowing these requirements down. But you have somebody with 20 years of experience. I don't care what their degree's in at that point. You have enough practical hands-on experience and you've done it at enough levels and in enough different organizations that you can definitely go in and do this. And I think that in a situation like that, that specific desire for specific degrees is going to hold you back, right? That's going to limit an already limited talent pool even further and it's also requires clearances and where it's a whole thing, right? And like that's
Mhm.
part of what we have to sit with, but conversely, when I've looked at folks that have call it 0 to 3 years of experience, I think that your degree matters far more when you're just coming into the workforce, and I think where you went to school matters far more then as well because that's going to speak to the quality of the education. And so, thinking that like sitting and balancing that, I think is absolutely part of it. But I also agree that if you're doing like actual research work and you're working at that top of the pyramid, yeah, absolutely. That there's a level of education required, and if even if it's just from a to your point, John, if PhDs in all different areas, whether it's electrical engineering, chemical engineering, economics, there's a thought process and there's ability to rigorously think through data that is going to be far more prevalent with folks, I think, that have a doctorate than those that don't.
Yeah, when I was a director at eBay, I met with a very famous professor at Stanford, and I said, "Hey, you've got these graduate students in your classes. How can eBay form a relationship with them?"
Hmm.
And he said, "Let me be upfront. 100% of my students have job offers. Like Microsoft and Google are writing them big checks before they even graduate. It's like you're never going to be able to hire these people. They don't want to go to eBay." I said, "Yeah, I know that. I wouldn't go to eBay first either, but I want to form a relationship with them. I want to show them here's the fascinating problems eBay has. Here's the fascinating data eBay has because we may not be their first job, but I'd love a shot at being their second or third job.
Hmm.
And we have no pipeline with them. And so, like, if eBay can't hire the top AI talent in the country, you know, your little company or your medium-sized company really doesn't have a chance. And
Hmm.
so you have to be more creative and you have to look broader. One of the things that I realized when I was at eBay was the only resumes I was getting were men. I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And so I went back to the recruiters, had a conversation about them, and they said, well, basically, this is the degrees we're looking for from these schools, and they're like 95% male. It's like, okay, well, let's change the criteria. Like, let's look at broader sets of degrees. And I started getting more resumes and more women. And guess what? Some of those women were fantastic scientists. It's just they weren't in this really tight niche that we were hiring in. And they came in, did wonderful work, and it was great. But and so what it also did is it moved me outside of competition with Microsoft and Google and all those other companies.
Yeah, Nick, you brought up a good point about because this is obviously in the recruitment world that I work with this all the time, and I think we're going to see a significant decline of companies' ability to maintain talent when they're so strict and rigid about their hiring. And I think a big part of it, not I don't think it's, I mean it's something I see all the time, is that they're just putting band-aids on broken legs, and because there's nobody pauses to think about how can we solve this problem internally? Because the reality is it's very rare they're going to find that specific individual. And so what instead, like some of the things that Horizon has done, for example, is create a solid not only onboarding experience. Part of that is training on how Horizon actually does their software development. But then the other piece of it is having a seat at the table for like the recruitment team, the talent development team, to have a seat at the table and to explain to the hiring managers who have no idea what recruitment is like, have no idea what the job market is like and the candidate market, and educate them around here's what you're going to get and so on, and how expensive it is and et cetera, et cetera. And I think another part that John mentioned is having a proper mentorship in place. If you don't have some kind of innovation lab, some kind of training lab for your staff internally, which actually does not have to cost you much, in fact, and so on. If you don't have that, you're going to be left behind because the top talent, as John mentioned, might not be choosing you. You might not be able to afford them, but you're going to have these other great potential that if you just invest a little bit of time and money and have a system and process in place, you'll be just fine. So, and I think again, companies are just trying to put band-aids on broken legs instead of actually fixing the broken leg.
I
Yeah, I
agree.
talked to the senior vice president and I said, hey, you're really hurting yourself. So, like, take a walk on your floor. So, there was about 400 people on this floor, and they did all kinds of different roles. And I said, walk around and pay attention to who is wearing headphones. And so they walked around, and you could see that like the sales type of people or like the PMs, they were talking to each other. They were like, let's go to lunch together. And they were like, because being social and sharing ideas and building coalitions is a big part of their job. And as
Mhm.
you keep walking around the floor, you get to the scientists and the engineers, and they're wearing headphones and they're trying to pay attention because the work that they do requires long periods of intense concentration because you got to keep all this stuff in your head as you're doing it. And when someone taps you on the shoulder or they make a big noise, it's like you can lose that. Then you have to start over again, reading this stuff again. I said, look, we weren't doing return to office then, but if I sat down with that senior vice president again, I'd say there are roles where quiet and concentration and maybe being alone
Mhm.
dramatically improve productivity. And if you want to hire in people into those roles, a great thing to do is promise them that environment because they will leave a crazy, awful, noisy, stuck together, elbow to elbow company for a company that's like, hey, we get it, right?
Mhm.
You need a different environment. We're going to provide you with the environment that works for you. And by the way, if you've got PMs that are like forced to work remotely and can't hang out with their other PMs, right? Or you got sales bros who are forced to be remote and never get to hang out with each other, they're miserable. So, like, tailor your solution and your environment and your return to office policy to the roles, and you'll get better productivity. People will be happier and they'll leave other companies to come to yours to have that.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. And as you look at the nature of these, I mean, as I look at the nature of hiring and retaining people, right? Yeah, there's people that you just don't necessarily want in your company, right? And that's just going to be part of it from either a culture fit or a skills fit, what have you, or both. But I think that, building the right environment for folks so that they can ensure that they're able to do their job most effectively and they enjoy it is important. And what I always tell people is as you're looking at return to office, like don't have people return to office, a couple days a week and then have all their meetings on Teams or Zoom or whatever anyway, because that's like, because everybody's not back in the office at the same, like that's defeating the purpose, right? Then you have somebody in the office just to have them in the office, to have them in the office. Like if you're going to do it in a very, in a very well thought out way where you're going to set people up for success and there's going to be business reasons and there's a business need that needs to be met where in person is just going to do it better, right? Like we all know that there's times where it's better to just pick up a phone for 5 minutes than go back and forth on emails for 35, right? And if you can set your return to office policy up so that you are enhancing that and building and further building out the team and putting people in positions to do that collaborative work so that they can go home and do their highly concentrated work remotely or elsewhere. I think that's a winning formula.
Yeah, for a science focused company, a science focused startup, the way I would set it up is everybody who's science focused or an engineer that prefers it works remotely, great. We don't have a desk for you. We don't have any meeting rooms to put you in. It's like you're 100% remote. We're going to bank on that and we're not going to spend money on leases. But then once a quarter or so, we're going to come together and we're going to have a great time, right? We're going to You're going to present ideas, we're going to discuss ideas, we're going to look at new papers that came out, we're going to maybe have a coding competition. Like for 1 week, we're all going to be at some hotel convention center somewhere, right? We're going to have great food
Mhm.
and we're going to be intensely collaborative. And then you're going to go back home again, right? That's what tends to work for scientists. Is like they really do want to collaborate, and they do, over, text messages and whatnot with each other, but they don't need to collaborate every day,
Mhm.
right? Scheduled collaboration that's intense and fun and recognizes them and recognizes new ideas. That works really well for scientists. That's why they all like going to conferences and presenting papers and whatnot. It's the same kind of thing. They get to have this intense collaboration and then take those ideas back and work on them in private where they can really think,
Mhm.
right? Anyway, so I don't think companies realize that.
Yeah, I love what John was saying, and it's something else that actually just came to mind as well. If I might add just on a final piece on the retention and productivity, I think
Mhm.
um, one thing that is an easy win for companies, well, two things, I guess, if you want to do it the hard way is, part of it is like just ask what do you people need to work at their best? Like as simple as that. Like let's start with just the basics. But if you are a company that is huge or you just can't, manage to ask every single person, you cannot obviously oblige to every single person. I think also looking at solutions that provide helping individuals and also their managers identify what is it that they actually need to be at their top game, which is going to be different for everybody, right? And so and this is something that John and myself and a third co-founder are the solution that we're working on with ShiftWell is like, how can we solve this problem for companies where they are, that you don't need to have this manager who's already overwhelmed, who already doesn't even know what's right for them, then try to work with their people, because that's the manager's job ultimately, to retain the people. That's the message that's being pushed out. But managers are managing more people than ever before today. So how can we streamline that process? How can we make it simpler for people? And I think for companies, you have if you're a smaller company, listen, maybe just asking your team, what is it that you need? How do you work best, right? Assuming you have that relationship. And if you're in that large organization, how can I create that space? How can I make it accessible and available to people and scalable to my whole company, right? And looking for solutions in that space. So I think we missed that. We missed just simple, again, going back to just you working with people. They know what they want. And if they don't know what they want, there's tools to help them find that out. But it's up to you to create the space and to provide the resources to help them get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I view my role as a leader is it, and in leadership is it's my job to go and solve problems that my people can't or is out of their scope, right? If things escalate, if it moves too far, if it's something that
Mm.
they don't know how to solve, those are the things that I do. It's my job to clear the way for the folks that work for me to ensure that they can do what they do best, and frankly, do what they do better than me a lot of the time, right? And so I think that having that service mentality in leadership is huge. And I always, every single meeting with them, I always ask this right before signing off, what do you need from me? How can I help you? What problems do you have right now that you're not sure what you're trying, like how to solve? And how can I approach it so that, to help set you up for success? Because like that's like I hire people because I want them to succeed. And so how like that's my job. It's to go out and clear the way so that they can. you know and so as we start thinking about this, a little bit more from a as we think about it, are there any other things that you think that folks can do to help help like either improve like employer branding or other cultural structural factors to attract and retain the best folks?
I work with a lot of kind of Gen Zs and the younger generations at the moment, and what I see is attractive to them, and we know this from numerous studies, that people want to, aside from salary is still important, sure, but I think flexibility and also progress, growth. They want to have the flexibility, to John's point, right? Like, so that we're discussed that. But then the other part is there a growth in a company? Is there progress? Are they actually learning new things? I think keeping people engaged and retaining talent is going to come down to, are you keeping them interested in what they're doing? Do they feel like they're growing? Because if your company is like old school and your leadership is like, listen, AI is not going to impact us, and then you're not even talking about it, to me as a young talent who is in tech, who does see all this disruption going on around me, and I'm like, my company is not addressing this, my company is not providing resources or education around this, that makes me nervous. I'm going to look for somewhere else. So I think that's super important. This is what keeps people engaged. I think what I also see, the soft skills, the ability to communicate, the ability to manage conflict, the ability to manage your time is becoming more and more popular. Like when I get corporate requests, like that is still, to me, I'm always mind blown. It's like, how are we still requesting communication? And when I talk to people that are, in their 70s, have been trainers in this field, they said, Elena, they've been asking us for communication as the top requested kind of soft skills training back 50 years ago. So it is, all of these things are still very much true today. So I think looking at how can you make sure that people are developing from a holistic point of view, not just I need you to do this job and I need you to just put your head down and do this. I think new generations, many of them, not everybody, but many young people want something more. And as they see the uncertainty in the job market, if you're not putting on another skill set besides your main one, if you're not having some kind of generalist approach to some things that you're doing, I think it becomes scary and uncertain. And again, you need to, as a company, you start addressing some of those concerns that I see, that when I talk to young talent today, that is kind of what they want to see.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the complete answer to that. Um, I've spoken with and worked with professors at the Foster School of Business and to their MBA classes, and I've worked closely with Wharton professors and their students. Um, Obviously, I've worked with leaders at major tech companies, but also I've got a good friendship with someone who founded a Fortune 100 company, and we talk a lot about a lot of these things, and I love those conversations, right? Because I'm trying to figure that out too. I think Elena's got a lot of the right points, but I mean, the number one thing I'd like to get out of this podcast is people coming to me and saying, "Hey, I've got a medium-sized company and I really want to talk to somebody about this stuff." Like, let's just talk because I want to learn what's working for you and share what's worked for others. So that way I can help other people. I think this is the most fascinating problem that business leaders are going to face in the next 10 years. And we know we have this enormous wave of retirements coming,
Hmm.
right? Every company is going to face this enormous wave of retirements. They've got to figure this out. They've got to get more productivity. They've got to have happier employees. They've got to retain employees better because otherwise, this demographic wave is going to be a huge problem for them. And they're going to,
Hmm.
everything they work to build up in this company could go away if they don't pay attention.
Yeah, I think some of them are going to go away. Truthfully, I do. I think,
I mean, they
Yeah.
always,
yeah,
somebody always does, right? But
yeah.
it doesn't have to be what you poured your life into, right? You can have your company can get bigger and better and healthier.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be the one
Yeah.
that fails to make the transition through this disruption.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think, and some of the things that I hear, because I also have a lot of younger folks that work for me, in a couple of different of my organizations, right? I think that you see this, constantly with every generation that comes up. I think the older folks have, generally push back and say, oh, and back in my day, it was whatever, like, is like, this not how it used to work, but like times have changed. And when you look at the rate of change continues to accelerate. And so, of course, everybody's going to be different and have different values. I think that a lot of the problems that we hear about with younger folks stem from not investing in them and not ensuring that they feel appreciated. I think that one of the most important parts of building, and I think one of the things we've talked around but haven't come out and like directly said specifically is that you have to build an organization that people feel safe and secure and safe to take risks in, safe to propose ideas and come up with ideas because otherwise you're not going to get that kind of creativity, and different perspectives, right? Because, I think that, I like generationally, there's very different perspectives on work and life and things like that in general. And I think if you find the right people for the right organization and you bring them in and you give them the opportunity to build and grow and feel appreciated, feel like they're compensated, if, like fairly, because inflation has hit really hard over the last couple of years. And wages have stayed pretty flat since like the late 80s. Real wages have. And so, when you combine but costs have gone up, a lot over the last, 40 years. So when you combine all of this, I think that we're in a situation where people generally feel like they're being squeezed by corporations who are making, record profits year over year over year. And I think that, building and creating a culture that appreciates people, that invests in people will pay dividends in the long run. I think that there's always going to be folks that aren't going to step up to the moment and are going to self-sabotage or be sabotaged or just not be able to perform and go up to the next level. But when you look at, the right people, the only ones that you will only know if they're able to by giving them the opportunity to.
Yeah, I think there's some people that want to build a 10-year company, right? Get
Hmm.
in, squeeze as much profit out of it as possible, a 10-year company, then, it all falls apart, but it's okay. They have money to go build another 10-year company.
Hmm.
I'm more of the mindset of how do you build a 1,000-year company? How do you build something that not only lasts, but is valuable for everybody involved, right? The customers love it, the employees love it, uh, you know, that doesn't mean that everybody stays in the company their entire lifetime. Like people might move back and forth, but they talk about how incredible the experience was and they refer back to it, right? My experience in building Chrome and working with the Chrome team changed my life, right? The scale at which these engineers were willing to go and do things and the ideas and the enthusiasm and the automation, all of that really changed how I thought about engineering.
Hmm.
Um, so I'd rather, I don't know, my style of company is let's build a 1,000-year company. Let's
Hmm.
build something that's self-sustaining, that's growing, that's adapting over time. Um, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of those people that just they want a 10-year company. That we're just going to beat everybody and squeeze as much profit out of it as possible. And then it fails, that's okay. We go start another one. But that's not who I am.
Hmm. I'm with you. Anything to add, Elena?
No, ditto.
All right, fantastic. As we start to get ready to wrap up, is there anything else that we should, anything else I didn't touch on, anything else that you guys think we should mention specifically here in this space?
I guess from my side, just the final message is, I've kind of said it in different parts before, but just let's look as whether you are, a leader of a company or starting a company or managing a team of like a smaller team of a company, I think just start to look at humans that are much more than just the jobs that they do, because there's so much that impacts us outside of our jobs that we need to take into consideration if we want the team to be at the top performance. And it's going to be different for everybody, and everybody's trying to get that productivity out of their team members, but we're not doing it right. And so I think just looking at it holistically at the human being and all that encompasses of what it takes to be a human being, and how like the personal lives and work lives are completely interconnected now. And I think that's happening, that's something new in the last 5 to 10 years that has happened that we've now starting to realize. And I think we need to also address those things and pay attention from all sides. Not to say we need to, be best friends and be into family. That's not what I mean. I just mean look at your professional, at your organization beyond just what they do day to day.
Hmm.
Yeah, so Elena, Jordana, and I, we started ShiftWell.ai because we believe fundamentally that human beings are super complicated,
Hmm.
and scaling solutions to treat them as individuals so the company gets the most productivity, the employee has a healthy, happy career where they're advancing and they're creating new things. Um, that requires more than an individual manager can provide.
Hmm.
And so, how do we take all of the tools of AI where we can gather a lot of data, think about complicated problems, and provide support for managers and companies? That's our goal, right? It's a big problem. It's a hard problem, but we think we've got a handle on it, and we're really excited about it. So we think that's the way forward. That managers don't have to be burdened with this unsolvable problem, right? Managers can actually have a co-partner, an assistant. I'm not sure what word we're going to use, but someone at their side where they can work through these problems and really get the best results. We think that's how you drive productivity long term in a company. And it leads to so many good outcomes, right? When employees are happy, they're not suing the company, they're not leaving the company, they're more creative, they're enthusiastic with each other, they're not fighting with each other. Customers all benefit. I mean, you can feel a company that has this really positive set of employees that are really delighted about the stuff they're working on. It just comes through the products. And we think we can help get more companies there.
Oh, I love it. I love what you guys are doing. Love to continue to support and really appreciate you both joining Robots and Red State today. I've had a great time.
Yeah.
Likewise. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Robots and Red Tape, everybody. Hope you're having a great day.